Emily, what's your favorite moment in time?
Whoa. Crazy question that could be taken so many different ways.
Yeah, take it how you will.
My 6th birthday was pretty good.
Your 6th birthday? All right, sure. You remember your 6th?
It was
my 6th birthday was pretty good. That's probably my favorite of all time. We're talking about all time, like even before I was born, like dinosaurs too. Probably my 6th birthday.
Well, just right. It was a surprise party. Winnie the Pooh was there. It was nice.
Wow. I mean, that's really exciting, I'm happy for you. I'm glad we can preserve this memory for everybody.
Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. Every week on Butter No Parsnips, your hosts Kyle Imperatore and Emily Moyers take you on an adventure through the weird, wacky, wonderful, and sometimes even wicked world of one wayside word. Strange characters, delightful bits, and general joyousness abound. Join them as they test each other's etymological expertise.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. I'm Emily Moyers.
And I'm Kyle Imperatore, and wow, Emily, happy birthday. As a gift for your 6th birthday, I'm sorry I couldn't make it, but as a gift, I've brought a word.
Okay, a belated word.
A belated word.
I'll take
it. I think you might just like it when you open it up, because your word today is...
I'm unwrapping it.
Vignette. Vignette. Vignette.
Okay. So this is one of the times where we say a word and it's like, well, that's a word that I know. But now, is it a word that I know?
That's a good question. And only you can answer that.
So 2 definitions spring to mind when I hear the word vignette. I don't know if they're what you have, but I think...
Go for it.
I've seen a vignette referred to a photo where it has like this sort of blurred black background so that there's just one spot that's like sort of highlighted.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like a vignette can also be like a short scene or a tableau. Like in theater, you can use vignette to just mean like a very short sort of snapshot performance piece.
Yeah, Emily, that's pretty much spot on.
Nice.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good, Emily.
That's what I got. If there's any others, I don't know them, but those 2 I know.
Oh, there's like 100.
Great.
It's incredibly long.
What a relief.
Yeah. But yeah, Emily, we're going to talk about vignette photography later on in the episode. But the way that vignette is most often used in modern times is in regards to literature, referring to a graceful short piece of writing, music, or acting that presents a scene or tableau, paints a picture, or captures a brief period in time. And as such, it can be one that clearly expresses the typical characteristics of something or someone. So, which is pretty much spot on.
I feel like I've heard it used when you talk about like a play that is a series of vignettes or a book that is a series of vignettes.
Absolutely, Emily. We're only gonna sort of because the history of this word is so GD long, we're only gonna sort of touch on that at the end, but I'll leave a little cliffhanger for everybody to do their own research.
Whoa.
Whoa. Emily, like, I could tell you the origin of this, but do you think you know etymologically what the origin of this is? If you broke it down?
That's a good question. I sort of skipped over it in the guessing part because I knew stuff. So the et definitely means small. It's like a diminutive.
Yes, it's diminutive.
The vin with a G. Huh. That is a head scratcher there. I don't know. I'm trying to think what other words have that. Tell me, Kyle.
So none that you would know.
Oh,
so
thank
you're
goodness.
Not even good. Yeah. So the word is of French origin, right?
Would have to be with a G in there.
With a G in there. They're the only language that uses G's.
That's it. Italian doesn't famously have silent G's before ends.
That's true. Never.
Never. Absolutely. Only French.
But it comes from the French word vignette. Aww. Vignette.
Vignette. Little petit vignette.
Le petit Vignette.
Vignette.
And you're right. The et part is a diminutive. It's a diminutive alteration of the French vigne, which means vine or vineyard.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like Sauvignon.
Emily, Sauvignon, you're right that it is relating to grapes and wine. We just don't know where it came from.
Oh, it's just a mystery word. Love
Just a
those.
mystery. Yeah. But anyway, so that French word vigne comes through Middle and Old French from the vulgar Latin vinia, from the Latin vinea, meaning vineyard or a vine, especially a grapevine. This comes from the rare Latin adjective vineus, meaning of wine, from vinum, meaning wine, from the Proto-Italic vinum, meaning wine, and Proto-Indo-European words winom and weho, meaning wine or vine.
You know, thinking about it now, it makes perfect sense that wine and vine would be doublets.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Emily.
Yeah, I would have never thought about that consciously, but yeah, it's based on all of the words that you just tracked. I would assume we get the English word wine from those as well.
Yeah, we get wine and vine, both from that root.
Wow.
Which is like, yeah, you look at it and you're like, these two aren't related. And then you're like, well, I guess they kind of have to be.
Yeah, a W and a V are not that far apart. So, and barring that, they're the same word.
But that's really all you need to know about the etymology. But
why does a word for small vine mean short scene?
I had the same thought. And I
Do you
thought,
think they saw the future of the short video sharing app?
Emily, I can't even tell you how much I wanted to almost talk about that in this episode because it's kind of a series of vignettes that is posted on it, but we're not going to talk about it. So that's part of the cliffhanger.
It's dead anyway.
It's dead.
Get over it. It's gone.
So, Emily, here's how we get there. In the early 1300s, Old French used the word vignette to describe an ornamental motif in the form of branches and leaves of intertwining vines. And this was used to refer to architecture, walls, furniture, dishes, gold, fabric, basically any sort of decorative item that would have this kind of vine-like Gothic design, right?
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the vision.
This was Englishified in the early 1400s as vignette, V-I-N-E-T or V-Y-N-E-T or other spellings.
Sure.
Not vignette. Different word.
Okay.
Vignette. And this is detailed for us in one 16th century history of Henry VIII describing kirtles of crimosine and purple satin embroidered with a vignette of pomegranates of gold.
I got brewed in a vignette of pomegranate gold. What did you say?
So far. It's kirtles, which are like shirts, tunics of crimson and purple satin embroidered with a vignette of pomegranates of gold.
Pomegranates of gold.
Yeah. Pomegranatus, you know, that famous Old English. Pomegranatus.
That's my favorite pizzeria. Pomegranatus.
It's like Papa and Mama smashed together. It's like an AI-generated pizza place.
Yeah, it's like you had an AI-generated image, so it didn't have a lot of brain power left to think about text.
Pomegranatus.
It's just the back half isn't letters anymore.
Gonna get me some ZB and Pipa. Now, Emily, when I say the term illuminated manuscripts, what comes to mind?
It's where the first letter is the that SpongeBob writes in that episode.
Yes. Yeah, basically, you got it.
When it's got like images and decoration and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So this is prior to the advent of the printing press and mass printing techniques, when all manuscripts had to be written out by hand. And some of the more special ones, they would paint images in.
Or fancy letters.
Or fancy letters. Or both.
Yeah.
So the watercolor images painted in these manuscripts were known as illuminations, from Latin illuminare, meaning to light up, in reference to their precious gold or silver inlays, because they were actually, it was like this whole process of mixing like gold and silver with watercolor and gum arabic to get it to stick to the page. It was like a really intense process.
So it's like they were like gold foiling it almost, but with paint.
But with paint. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I always wondered why it was illuminated, so thank you for that.
Now, if you're wondering, like I did, Emily, the later term that we use today, illustration, from illustrare, which also meant to light up.
Oh.
Refers
yeah, because that means light also.
Like luster, yeah.
Yeah.
This refers instead to the intellectual enlightenment that pictures can provide. That's where we get illustration from.
Oh. Because they're all worth 1,000 words.
If they're worth 1,000 freaking words. Anyway, Emily, by the late 14th century, manuscript illuminators became known as limners, Limners, and their process, the art of limning, or limming, a shortening of the Latin illumino.
I'm just finding it funny because limnologist means someone who studies lakes. So it's...
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, so limnology, the study of lakes...
And like inland water.
...comes from the ancient Greek limne, which meant marsh or lake.
Right.
And unrelated to the
from
Latin.
This Latin, yeah. That makes sense.
Yep. So anyway, Emily, as the art of limning evolved, limners began mimicking the vignettes of the other... more decorative art forms, right? They started painting these vine-like imagery.
Sure, like in the margins, sure.
In the margins, yes. One 1573 treatise called The Art of Limming begins thus. First thou shalt with a pencil of black lead, or with a coal made sharp at the point, trace all thy letters, and set thy vignettes or flowers, and then thy imagery, if thou wilt make any. So it literally... The textbook on limning started with put in your vines. Yeah.
Yeah.
So vignettes first appeared as trailing tails on those meticulously detailed starting letters that you described, Emily.
Okay. So like coming off of the letter would be...
Coming off the letter,
vine?
Yeah. And then that evolved into... full page borders, and then it evolved into vignettes on full title pages. And so through metonymy, a vignette became a page's ornamental border, right? Just any ornamental border was a vignette. Or the ornamental title page was a vignette.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see the stepping stones.
There's stepping stones. So limners like Nicholas Hilliard transferred this technique to other works. As royal limner for Queen Elizabeth I, Hilliard perfected the Flemish art form of tiny book art-sized portraits called limnings. Because it was like, ew, if a portrait of a person was in a book, right? At the time, an illuminated manuscript.
Sure.
And these limnings were crucial in cementing her personal image. They're a really important part of like the Queen's press package, I guess. But the term that eventually stuck for these portraits was a synonym for vignettes, miniatures.
Oh.
Not from the Latin minutus, meaning small or diminished, as one might assume.
Not?
Emily, miniature, the word miniature, instead comes from the Latin miniare, meaning to illuminate, from minium, meaning minium or red lead, which was the red pigment used to miniate or paint or write letters in red in illuminated manuscripts.
Wow. I feel like I have looked at scans of old books where the text is just red, and I'm like, this was a weird choice.
That's exactly, so they started like highlighting letters in red to like make them more important
like
on the page.
Yeah.
And that evolved it to become a synonym for vignette because it was like this embellishment on the page. And then when that like book art form evolved into the miniature paintings, they called them miniatures just by process of, yeah, isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Because miniature is a word I've heard for like those portraits that people would like just carry with them of like, this is my wife across the sea and I have her portrait in this little booklet that I keep in my pocket.
I mean, that comes from those paintings.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's so fun.
So like mini, when we say something is mini, it doesn't literally mean it's small. It doesn't mean minute, right?
It means a portrait.
It means red lead is what it means.
Wow.
Yeah.
Red lead.
Anyway, Emily, with the advent of the printing press, vignettes were carved into stock woodcut borders that would then be sold to publishers. And these borders, since they weren't something that you could just spread along the page, they would be like popped onto pages in different places. The term vignette became associated with isolated images in blank spaces on the pages. Sometimes it was used synonymously with the terms frontispiece or tailpiece, which were at first images that came before or after a section in a book, and then they described like the whole page before or after a section, like the chapter page or the page after the chapter and stuff like that.
Sure.
We get to the mid-1600s, around 1640s, the word vignette just poof, disappears. No one's using it anymore. Still using vinery in books.
Just the word's out of style now.
It's
Only
out of
nerds
style.
are using it.
Yeah. There are other words that they use. We're not going to talk about them today. It'll be a whole other episode. But instead, 100 years later, in the mid-1700s, around 1750s, the word vignette is readopted from the French to mean all of these things.
Okay. So did it stay in French? It just died out in English and then came back?
Yes.
Got it.
Yep.
Wow.
In his 1974 A History of Book Illustration, author David Bland observes, the 18th century in France has often been called the Age of the Vignette. And it's because during this century, during the 1700s, vignettes as an art form in books, as illustrations, became these really detailed, commercialized illustrations that were like advertised as selling points for the book. Like, buy this book because we've got these detailed illustrations in them.
It's like when a modern book is like with 16 color gloss pictures.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They're like pop-up books, you know? Daniela Gotti, in their 2021 dissertation, Glimpses of the World, the Vignette in 21st Century American Fiction, remarks, the 18th century saw a proliferation of different forms of illustration and decoration even within the book. Frontispieces and decorated title pages were the most important illustrations between the book's covers, but outside of the text proper, scenes from the story were ever more often illustrated with full-page prints. So we've gone from just like kind of decorative vines, right, to just like illustrating the actual text that's in the book, right?
Wow.
Still calling these images vignettes.
From the border.
From just the vine.
Yeah.
The beginning
just
of the vine.
idea of vines.
Yeah. So a huge step forward in the life of the vignette is represented by the late 18th, early 19th century wood engraver Thomas Bewick, who is most famous for his book, A History of Birds. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
And his car.
It's spelled differently. It's spelled Bewick, I know.
Ooh.
He changed it not to be associated with the cars anymore.
Yeah. He said, I don't want my name on that, so I'll change my name.
As a printmaker, he's most notable for developing a technique relating to wood cutting, which is now called wood engraving. So, like, for printing, there had been metal engravings used where, like in woodcuts, you paint the raised portion, right, and then press it down. When printing with metal engravings, you fill the hollow areas with ink and wipe the ink off of the raised portions and press that down. So he was like, let's do it with wood. It won't wear down as much. And it comes with a better product.
Yeah.
But these types of engravings often left an ink edge around the block when you pressed it down. Because the ink's bleeding out because it was a square block that they would use.
Yeah.
Bewick avoided this by lowering the block's edges printing the ink more faintly and producing a fade-out effect.
Oh, here's where, yep, this is it. This is the vignette.
This is the vignette, Emily. This style of illustration became popularly associated with vignettes as illustrations. And then with the advent of camera photography in the 1820s, the type of photographic portrait showing only the head or the head and shoulders with the edges of the print shading off into the background was called a vignette.
So like that phenomenon in photography, like did they just borrow the name because it looked the same and the faded border was just a coincidence, or did they do the faded border in imitation of the portrait?
So at first, like early photography, it would happen in pictures unintentionally because the lens quality was poor.
Right.
But they literally made devices to come up with this effect because they loved vignettes so much. They loved the vignette illustration form so much. It was just the
style of portraits.
They said, let's do pictures like this too.
Wow.
Yeah. And this photographic effect, which was called vignetting, quickly became a popular tool in photographers' arsenals. I still use today, as anybody who's ever used an Instagram filter knows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There are many ways to accomplish this effect analogly, though. One such early method was called double printing or fancy printing, I saw in one magazine.
And it was in cursive.
fancy printing. It was accomplished by affecting the negative as it developed using the aid of a vignette glass, which was a plate of glass with a cardboard frame affixed around the edge and then cotton placed along the inside edge of the cardboard to make it dither as the light developed it.
That's a fun analog way to make that fade out happen. I like that.
Another method using what was called a vignette mask, which was fixed inside the camera between the lens and the plate, aided by a device called a magic vignetter, which was like the thing to put the vignette mask in.
Okay.
It creates the vignette during the exposure period when the picture is taken.
Oh, and then you could get to see it as you're photographing.
Another way that this was produced, this is a later example from 1929. It's an issue of American Photography, and it describes how to make his family's Christmas card, the early science fiction author Miles J. Brewer took a photograph to a signwriter for the purpose of having the vignetting done with an airbrush and white paint, saying, "Although the effect is just a little naive, I am sure that the average recipient of a card like this keeps it long after he has discarded a couple of bales of the rest of his Christmas greetings."
Delightful. And Seth, I do expect that with this year's Christmas card.
Yes. Please, a vignetting, if you will. Earlier, an 1858 edition of the Photographic News describes this style of portraiture, saying, "Vignette printing has always more or less charm about it, owing to the lightness which it gives to the figure, and again, there is the absence of that unruly member, to photographers, the hand, which always will obtrude itself upon your notice whether you will or not."
It will. It will be doing that.
It will be doing that. Anyway, Emily, we haven't even talked about how vignettes became scenes.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm itching to talk about that.
So, back to Thomas Buick. His vignettes had an even larger effect on the zeitgeist than in photography. So in his books, Buick would fill the blank spaces at the end of sections, of chapters, paragraphs, and stuff like that, with vignettes that he called tale pieces, T-A-L-E pieces.
Oh.
I don't think it's been explicitly stated why he called them that, but it's possibly an intentional usage of the word tale, because the vignettes that he put were these little tableaus that each told a miniature story. Daniela Gatti, from that earlier essay, called them a narrative still life.
Love that.
Yes. Buick said of his vignettes, "As instruction is of little avail without constant cheerfulness and occasional amusement, I interspersed the more serious studies with tale pieces of gaiety and humor, yet even in these seldom without an endeavor to illustrate some truth or point some moral."
He said, I felt like there was some slow bits in there, so I threw in some pitches.
Yeah, basically, literally that.
It's like his agent calling back the author, like, yeah, it got a little slow in the middle, so I thought maybe we could just stick in this scene completely unrelated, just to sort of break up the pacing a little bit. It's like, this is a book about biology? I don't...
So honestly, literally, because he was a naturalist, and so a lot of his books were like books about birds and books about nature and stuff like that. He also, like, at the time, woodcutters would make their woodcut and then send them off to the printer for the printer to do the printing. He was like, I don't trust those printers. Print the text, send me the books, and I'll put my engraving on myself.
Wow, yikes.
So it really was like, I think it could be better.
I know more than everyone.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
No. His vignettes sometimes depicted simple day-in-the-life scenes of, say, women collecting shellfish or a hunter in the snow. But they also frequently reveal human frailties. One depicts a drunkard seeing 2 moons in the night sky.
Oh.
Another depicts a cat stealing his owner's food while his eyes are closed in prayer, saying grace.
So funny.
These are
like one-panel cartoons in the newspaper.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Honestly, they might have influenced
these are Far Side comics,
like comics like that. I haven't done that sort of research.
Oh, that's really good.
A sad one shows a dog discovering his owner has hung himself from a tree, and there's a caption in Latin that says "Sero sed serio," which means too late but in earnest.
So sad. Why?
You tried, bud.
He said, I thought this book was getting a little boring, so I thought I'd put a real tearjerker in around chapter 3.
Who knows? It might come back to life.
It's a cliffhanger, really.
Emily, these illustrations blew open 19th century imaginations and became wildly popular. And he was like a no-name engraver, like not really that special of a not famous, you know? They're so popular, Emily. Charlotte Bronte's 1847 novel Jane Eyre famously opens with the titular character musing over her copy of Bewick's History of Birds. It's like the whole chapter's her talking about this book.
Crazy. Crazy.
Just a short snippet of her monologue reads, Each picture told a story, mysterious often to my undeveloped understanding and imperfect feelings, yet ever profoundly interesting as the tales Bessie sometimes narrated on winter evenings. With Bewick on my knee, I was then happy at least in my way.
Boy, life before television was sad.
Was sad. This was entertainment.
They had nothing.
So, Emily, stay with me here, all right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
From Bewick's imagery was born a visual art form, the romantic vignette, which dominated book illustrations for the next century. That's the kind of form, was these kind of circular images with, fading into the background of just kind of whimsical scenes of regular day life that told a whole story in this one scene. Right?
And that, do they mean romantic, like literally romantic, or just romanticized?
Romantic as in the art era. The romantic era.
Romantic era. Got it.
But, Emily, as Gotti states, from the captions for some of these later vignettes, a literary form emerged that sought first and foremost to depict in a short format the places, events, and conditions of everyday, ordinary life.
Like a scene setting, not necessarily like a story.
No, like a story. A whole so basically it started with text, right? The text gave us images, illustrations, and then they started to caption the illustrations and be like, we can write a story about this. And so these stories were these short stories that encapsulated this whole feel and time and person and tiny story of a thing.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely.
These literary vignettes might be isolated stories, or they could be loosely related collections. An early collection of vignettes, 1894, writer Brander Matthews wrote his Vignettes of Manhattan, and he says about it, "They are not stories, really. I am afraid not sketches even, nor studies. They are, I think, just what I have called them, vignettes. And there are a dozen of them, one for every month in the year, an urban calendar of times and seasons."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Emily, there's so much more that can be said about the vignette in modern day media and how its slice of life format has influenced episodic forms in plays, television, blog posts, and social media. I will recommend to all of you to read Daniela Gotti's dissertation for a more robust analysis of all that. She really just takes the cake on that. But instead, we must fade out on this miniature sketch as I ask you, Emily, to use vignette in a sentence.
Oh my goodness. Wow. What a good word. Okay. I mean, this is going to be a very specific example, but it's what keeps jumping in my mind. The first book in the Witcher book series is a series of vignettes to establish Geralt's character and the setting of the story.
Beautiful, Emily. We love a good Witcher reference on the podcast.
I do.
Well, Emily, would you love a game?
You know I would love a game, Kyle.
Emily, your game is called Is It Over Yet? It's not over.
I hated how doubting yourself you sounded when you said it. You didn't even you read that like you weren't even the one that wrote it.
I didn't, honestly.
You wrote it in a
who
fugue state.
Yeah. Emily, unlike this episode, vignettes are small, and so shall this game be.
Okay, perfect.
But the number of vignette definitions is not small. So for your game today, Emily, I'm going to give you a set of 3 subject areas, and you'll have to tell me which one does not use a special definition of the word vignette.
Perfect. Got it.
Okay. Your first group is gardening, wrestling, and poker.
Whoa. Okay. I could imagine a gardening one as like this, the flowers that are in this bed could be a vignette of flowers. Wrestling or poker are harder to I guess, wrestling, there's a sort of staged aspect, like performative aspect to that. So maybe that could, I'll say poker is the odd one out, because having played a lot of poker, I can't imagine what a vignette would be.
Emily, you got it. Nice job.
Nice.
A vignette in gardening, there's only one isolated use of it, but has been used to refer to little ornamental shrubs, which makes sense. Little vines, like
sure,
literally.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I've also seen it used, it's like a specific term perhaps in regards to vineyards. It's like a smaller vineyard on a vineyard can be called a vignette.
Oh, so
Yeah,
like in this area, we plant this specific kind of grape. So it's a vignette.
Yeah.
I get that.
But you're right. In wrestling, Emily, a vignette is any piece of entertaining video footage, usually meant to introduce a debuting character or signify an impending return. They call it a vignette.
When they say like Sunday.
Yeah. Vignette. Well, no, probably not like a commercial. Like in the actual wrestling, like before they introduce, like they've got a montage that they go up of a person, mugging for the camera, all that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, Emily, your next group is philosophy, psychology, and surveys.
Whoa. Interesting. I feel like I should have a beat on this for how much we've been talking about surveys in library school.
Yep.
And then the other two you said were philosophy and psychology? So maybe in philosophy and maybe in psychology, a vignette could be like a scenario that you talk about. Yeah, let's go with that and say that surveys is the odd one out.
You're so close, Emily.
Oh, good.
You've got the right definition, but the wrong.
Yep.
The wrong, So it's not used in philosophy to mean that. It's used in psychology to refer to a hypothetical situation to which research participants respond, thereby revealing their perceptions, values, social norms, or impressions of events, right?
So in that way, it applies to both psychology and surveys.
It then transferred into survey research to mean a short description of one or more hypothetical characters or situations is the vignette.
But not in philosophy.
And not as far as I could tell. And
Okay.
I did a lot of research. I Googled vignette philosophy and came up with no hits, so...
Oh. All right, fair enough.
Emily, here's your last one. Your three are postage stamps, money, and transit.
I mean, it's gotta be... postage stamps and money have portraits on them, and I can't... Transit?
Transit.
That's gotta be the odd one out.
Or, I played a trick on you, and there is no odd one out for this one.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good. I was worried you were going to tell me that postage stamp or money was wrong, and I was like, that would be crazy. They both have portraits that are in circles.
Yeah. No, you're right. So postage stamps, a vignette is the central pictorial image on a postage stamp. Similarly, in money, a picture or symbol on a stock certificate or unit of cash is called a vignette, particularly one that is difficult to copy, making counterfeiting less likely.
Yep. That makes
It's
sense.
called the vignette.
What does it
And
mean
then
in transit?
In transit, Emily, a vignette or vignette is a form of road pricing based on a period of time the vehicle may use the road. It's called this because the small sticker affixed to a vehicle windscreen to indicate that the tolls have been paid has like a little picture on it, so they call it a vignette.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, what a reach.
But yeah, Emily, just a series of vignettes that we've gone through today.
Yeah, a series of vignettes, as you often see. Wow, what a good word. I was like worried when it was a word that I knew, but there was so much to unpack that I didn't know.
Much.
And now I feel like I can use the word with more intention. Good word, Kyle.
Thanks, Em.
I like it. Hey, everybody, remember, you can watch us on YouTube at Butter No Parsnips. And you can find Butter No Parsnips on other social media, on Facebook and Instagram at Butter No Parsnips Podcast, and on TikTok at Butter No Parsnips. And if you like today's episode, consider giving us a 5-star rating or review wherever you heard us.
And if you really like today's episode, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/butternoparsnips. Donating $5 or more gets you exclusive access to Buttered Parsnips, our after-hours podcast.
Thanks so much to all of you. You guys help us make what we make.
And with that, I've been Kyle Imperatore.
And I've been Emily Moyers. And this has been Butter No Parsnips.
Butter No Parsnips is produced by Seth Glicksman, Emily Moyers, and myself, Kyle Imperatore. The main and accompanying themes were composed by Kyle Imperatore.